Sony Xperia Miro, yes, another Xperia. Looks a bit like the old Array with 3.5-inch screen, a 1500 mAh battery and Android 4 from day one. Only an 800 MHz processor though, so don't expect the earth. I had high hopes that the Huawei Ascend G300 here might make it into the top 5 later in this show. After all, I do love to pitch in bargains at you guys. Anyone remember the original orange San Francisco? However, the latter stunned at the time with its competitive AMOLED screen at an insanely cheap price compared to the Nexus 1, the flagship of the day. The Ascend G300 aims for the same price mark, around £100 on pay-as-you-go in the UK, but falls short of competing at any level other than battery life with things over £200. It's still great value, but it's not so head-stonkingly good that I'd fall over myself to recommend it to everyone. Let's start with the display. The tech here is several years old. The viewing angles are poor and you can't read the G300 at all if you're outside and the sun's out, which is a bit of a fail for any phone really, especially now we're used to the top phones having great outdoor visibility. Add in Nexus 1 style control icons here, which you have to hit on the high side, though it does seem to be more of a software issue this time. See here, I'm pressing the menu key, I can feel the screen detect the tap because the haptics vibrate, but no menu appears. Hit a tiny bit higher and boom, there it is. Very annoying. Then add in a slowish single-core 1 GHz processor. I cannot believe I'm calling a gigahertz slow. Only 180 megabytes of free RAM after booting and a very sluggish GPU, and it's pretty evident we are indeed down at the budget end of the Android market. Ice cream sandwich is promised in the future, but surely that's going to run even slower with these resources. But it's not all bad news. This is Android after all, and it's fully compatible with the likes of Google Maps, YouTube and the burgeoning Android Play Store. And once the initial setup syncs and app updates are out of the way, the G300 is plenty fast enough for casual, undemanding users who won't know any different. Huawei have added their own fairly lightweight overlay on Android 2.3.6, though I would ask the manufacturer, if this overlay is going to be this light, why the heck didn't you just use vanilla Android instead? This would have saved Huawei a massive amount of development time. This being a Vodafone exclusive for a few more months, at least in the UK, there's quite a bit of Vodafone bloatware here and no way to hide it or uninstall it. Mind you, anyone who knows what they're doing will simply put on a new app launcher, of course. The first thing a new user will want to do actually is buy a big micro SD. You get 600 megabytes of system disk for apps, adequate I think for the target market, and 370 megabytes of free mass memory. That's not an awful lot overall, so best budget for a 16 gigabyte micro SD at least. I did like the G300's lock screen with a swipe system for unlocking or launching 3 other apps until I discovered that you can't actually alter the assignments, which is a bit of a fail. The camera is decent for a £100 phone if you know what you're doing and make allowances, though I do expect a lot of out-of-focus experiments like this one along the way. And this is test video capture on somewhat erratic sunshine on the Ascend G300. Pretty hopeless video and audio, but hey, it's £100. The speaker's nice and loud here playing a video, one of the few from my MP4 collection that would play. The G300 is codec challenged, it seems. Still, the target market won't be using this for media consumption. I think most G300 users will be using normal phone functions, plus some social, some browsing, and a lot of Android games. Add in the G300 star feature, a replaceable 1500 mAh battery that will last a typical user through a good 2 days of hard use, and well, what have we got? A budget Android smartphone that is decent for its price, but certainly not much more than that, despite the 4-inch screened faux aluminium feel. Unless you really prize battery life over all else, it's not the rush out and buy at bargain that the San Francisco was back in the day. However, my first Android, I can think of much worse ways to get on the smartphone ladder. Ah yes, these top 5s do get harder and harder to adjudicate. So many great smartphones, so few slots to call, that it seems that most of you do like the way I get off the fence in terms of my opinions and restrict myself to just 5 recommendations. I so wanted to include a QWERTY candy bar in the top 5 to show that the world doesn't completely revolve around touchscreen slabs, but I just can't find anything that's good enough. The BlackBerry 9900 is a super bit of hardware that's hampered for general recommendation by patchy update rollout and by the requirement to fully buy into the BlackBerry Internet System. It's an all-or-nothing handset as a result. The Nokia E6, again Gorilla Glass capacitive touchscreen and full QWERTY keyboard and D-pad, such a flexible device and with a monster battery, but it's flawed by less than perfect Symbian app compatibility, and by the way, dust continually makes its way under the relatively small and fiddly touchscreen. Gah! And there simply haven't been any standout Android devices in this form factor, so for me, touch only it is. Hovering just outside the top 5 are HTC's One S and One X, superb smartphones utterly crippled by no way to expand their memory and, most irritatingly, no way to replace the battery 9 months down the line when it's starting to falter. Even so, these two handsets might still have made it into the top 5, but for better competition with more flexible functionality. The Galaxy Note missed out too. Super device in almost every way, but yes, it's too big to really be a phone, for me at least. Sorry, Note fans. And for the first time since autumn 2010, almost 2 years ago, the Nokia N8 doesn't make the top 5, even though it has been my personal choice for so long. It still has the second best camera of any phone in the world. I'm coming to the first in a minute. And in the Xenon Flash, the terrific speaker for podcast listening, the always-on AMOLED clock, and the wealth of gadgets inside. Add in Symbian Bell updates, and the N8 is still a cracking phone that should be grabbed if you see one now being sold off cheaply. The Nokia Lumia 710 also missed the top 5. I've been astonished by the price cuts that keep hitting this so soon after launch. And this full-spec Windows phone is a steal at around £100 or so on pay-as-you-go on some operators in the UK. Clear 3.7-inch screen, decent processor, camera and speaker, not bad. Add in changeable back covers and a replaceable battery, and you have many people's favourite Windows phone, even though it's a budget unit. But stilted SAR switching, restrictions at every turn, and an uncertain future with no hope of a Windows Phone 8 upgrade. I just couldn't do it. And so to the top 5 recommendations at the end of June 2012. At number 5, the successor to the Nokia N8 and the undisputed camera phone champion for the next couple of years, I suspect. This is the Nokia 808 PureView. Review coming in the very next phone show, but for now note the 41 megapixel sensor that produces insanely great 5 megapixel results and a genuinely lossless still and video zoom facility, plus all the N8's goodies, including the FM transmitter and an insanely good speaker, and a larger 4-inch screen with the highest contrast of any phone display in the world. And, well, you can see why I'm smitten by it already. Yes, it runs Symbian, which means less third-party app choice, but what there is here in the surprisingly swishy Nokia Bell isn't too bad. And as usual, there's good multitasking and good battery life. At number 4 is the super slick Galaxy Nexus, part Google, part Samsung. It's pure, unadulterated Android and right in line for getting the Jelly Bean OS update on day 1. I love the virtual control buttons, as I mentioned in show 170, and the huge 4.65-inch screens, almost identical to that in the Galaxy S3, of which more in a moment. The only downsides are the camera here at the top, which is good but not the best, and the terribly quiet speaker down at the bottom. I have to resort to using a Bluetooth speaker for listening to podcasts around the house, or just listen on headphones. Otherwise, it's the Android superfan's smartphone of choice. At number 3, I reviewed it in Phone Show 171, the Android-powered Motorola Razr Max, which offers so many options. Either root it and do what you want with the super hardware, or install a third-party launcher, much less painful, or just wait a week or two and you'll get the new Android 4 firmware, apparently quite close to stock ice cream sandwich. Either way, you end up with a super screen, a fast processor, and a phenomenal 3300 mAh battery. Bye-bye Android battery worries forever. At number 2, still flying high, is the Apple iPhone 4S. Yes, its screen is small. No, you can't replace the battery yourself. Yes, you have to buy into the ecosystem almost as much as with RIM and BlackBerry. Yes, some of Apple's tactics in the industry can be intensely annoying. But there's no denying the build quality, the way the interface is largely consistent from app to app, the fairly gentle learning curve for non-techies, the decent camera, the fantastic range of applications for every need and occasion, the wide range of accessories. The iPhone 4S is still my default recommendation for the man or woman in the street who comes asking, what shall I buy? But my number 1 takes the Galaxy Nexus already mentioned and improves on almost everything aside from the purity of vanilla Android. And I mean everything. Screen, speaker, processor, camera, battery, materials, software extras. The Galaxy S3 reviewed in Phone Show 172 is a monster of a phone and raises the bar in almost all areas. It may be too large for some, it may be too expensive, but it's absolutely the first choice for smartphone geeks to use and, yes, to fiddle with right now, and a worthy number 1.